Hello again, and welcome to the fifth segment of this week's presentation for Politics of Southeast Europe on the integration of states of Southeast Europe with the European Union. In this segment, I would like to talk about the role, and the changing role, as it turns out, of civil society in processes of integration. What I would suggest here, there is a general tendency to look at the process by which states negotiate accession and by which they meet the terms of conditionality as a process that is primarily led by the European Union, with the states complying and with expert groups and advocacy groups in the civil sector in these states providing assistance. The changed experience of accession and recent research on accession would suggest that this model does not completely describe the process that takes place. And this is one of the major contributions deriving from research into the accession process by Natasha Wunsch. There's Natasha there in the picture. Um, what, uh, what she's found, and this has been developed in further detail by other researchers, is that there are a set of changes in the accession process after particularly the accession to membership on the part of Bulgaria and Romania. And this was inspired by the sense that Bulgaria and Romania had become members of the European Union without really meeting entirely all of the standards that were expected by the European Union, in particular standards that relate to rule of law, to independence of the judiciary, and to corruption. And so in the next accession, when Croatia became a member, but this has been adopted in the subsequent negotiations too, after Croatia became a member of the European Union, what you saw was closer integration of civil society into the negotiation process. And here's how it works. Basically, civil society groups are engaged in advising the European Commission on the question of whether the progress of the states where they operate on the conditions in meeting the conditions that are imposed by the European Union is satisfactory. Okay, now this sounds like a technical process, one in which the European Union is seeking expert advice from people who are engaged in detail with the issues with which they're involved. But in fact, what it involves is a change in the relations of power within these states, in which the civil society groups are able to harness the power, in particular the decision-making power of the European Union, the ability of the European Union to finally say yes or no into domestic politics. Because what civil society organizations do, and these are partly expert organizations, but many of them are also advocacy organizations, is they partner with governments in the EU as participants in the negotiation process. And what this means is that the civil society organizations gain the power to interpret the conditions that are imposed by the EU in terms of their own goals, and that gives them the ability to present their goals to the government as if those goals are conditions of the EU, and they have the ability to provide some enforcement to this by advising the EU as to whether compliance is satisfactory or not. Now, a consequence of this is that there has been a tendency, and this is visible in the accession of Croatia, to conditions becoming more comprehensive, more systematic, and clearer than they had been in previous accessions. And to give an example with Croatia, one of the conditions of the European Union was that refugee return should be guaranteed. Croatia had originally complied by passing a law saying, yes, refugees can return. What the civil society organizations did is they went to the European Union and said, this isn't sufficient, this doesn't satisfy the condition. What they need to do also is to provide them with income support, with housing, with protection against reprisals and violence so that they can return. So the involvement of civil society organizations in the negotiating process tended to strengthen and clarify the conditions that were imposed. And after the accession process, during the accession process and after, what you find is the civil society organizations from Croatia sharing information and expertise with civil society organizations in other candidate states. So they're going to Serbia, to Montenegro, to Macedonia, Albania, and Kosovo, and telling the civil society organizations, this is how we were able to leverage the power of the European Union, and here are some ways in which possibly you can do that. Now, this sounds like a great coup for the civil society organizations. That is, they are suddenly able to receive political power and a way of enforcing their political power in a way to which they did not have access before. Here is the downside of the story. That is, the increased power that is gained by civil society organizations does not tend to outlast the period in which they're able to use the European Union for tactical support. So once the state becomes a member, then all of the people in these government ministries who are trying to coordinate with the civil society organizations so that they could have agreement that the standard has been met, once they became a member, the people in the ministries would get a call from the people in the civil society organizations and say, sorry, we have already achieved our goal. We don't need to listen to you anymore. So this process of engaging civil society has resulted in some partial victories for activists in civil society, but they are not necessarily long-term or permanent or sustainable victories. What happens then with reforms that are made in order to meet conditionality remains to be seen in the future.